Here's a thought for the ages. What is joy, and how do we get some of that? Attempts at this question have been made by all sorts, from spiritual gurus and philosophers to chemists. Today, I'm speaking with someone who might actually have an answer because he's kind of all of the above. Welcome to Zeitgeist Radio, where we learn about musical subcultures from people in the scene. I'm Morgan Rowe, and today I'm speaking with a psychiatrist whose jazz piano performances blend music and mindfulness, walking the audience through such simple sounding topics as joy, play, and celebration. But somehow, when he speaks, these simple pleasures seem hugely important. My guest today is Dr. Michael McGee, a psychiatrist, author, and pianist based in Florida. Dr. Mike, welcome to Zeitgeist Radio.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to speak with you. Before we get into the bulk of the exciting interview that I am so looking forward to, I'd love to hear from you, in your words, who are you musically? You're an esteemed psychiatrist, but who are you musically?
I think I'm pretty much a musical omnivore. I just love music, of all styles, pretty much. I mean, heavy metal, I have a hard time with. Uh,
Okay.
but other than that, I
It's its own.
love music, and I really love jazz. I think that's my greatest love.
What did you start with? How long have you been playing?
So this is a funny story. I played violin as a little kid in the orchestra, like at the age of 7, in the
Yeah.
school orchestra, and and I was good, and really enjoyed it. Then we moved, and there was no orchestra, so I stopped playing. And then around 10, I was just playing around on a piano and having fun, and I noticed that if you play all the black keys, you could play the song Windy. Da 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 da, pentatonic. And it was like so cool. And somebody came up and said, "Wow, that's really cool. You should play the piano." So I went home to my parents and said, "Can I get a piano?" So around the age of 10, I started taking piano lessons.
Everyone knows it's windy. That's a good song. It's a bop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and have you played discontinuously all the way through your career? I
Well,
mean, how do you make time for that in med
I
school? My
know,
goodness.
really, right? So when I graduated from high school, I stopped playing. So I only played for like
Mm.
6 years or so, 6 or 7 years. And then I sort of played around a little bit when I was in medical school, and then at Stanford there was a jazz workshop that came, and I grew up in kind of the mountains of California, and I don't think they didn't know what jazz was or bagels or really anything. And
Jazz and bagels.
yeah, right. And so I mean, it was like being exposed to something that I'd never heard of before. I'd listened to sort of, rock and roll, on the AM radio, but that was it. And wow. I mean, so I took a workshop, and I was working on MD PhD at the time, and really not happy with the bench research I was doing. I realized it wasn't fulfilling, but I love this jazz stuff. So I took off a year from medical school and I did clerkships part time. And during that time, I just devoted myself to learning how to play the piano again. And we had a little band called the Joy Spring Quintet, and I played in a vocal ensemble and in the jazz band at the local community college, and had a lot of fun. Took lessons, and then when I got into my internship, obviously when you're in an internship, you're working 3 days. You're on call every third night, and all you're doing is sleeping and working. So I stopped playing the piano until I got out of my residency training, and then I started taking lessons again. Then my kids came, and I stopped playing again. And I just got back into playing maybe 3 years ago at the age of like 65 or 54. So it's been really intermittent. I mean, I have a regret that I wish I had found a way to sort of maintain music through all the ups and downs of a very demanding life and profession. And so, but it's never too late to get back into it.
It's always there for you, always.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this project. Can you talk a little bit about generally about this project that you did for the first time and hopefully the first of several
Right.
from my perspective? But can you talk a little bit about what you did recently?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously I'm a therapist and a healer, and so a lot of my work is about helping people to find and cultivate their own life wisdom, right, and their own healing wisdom. Um, and so I really wanted, I mean, as a musician, I'd have to say I have maybe modest gifts, right? You heard my performance, right? And you gave me wonderful feedback on my technique, which I really appreciate. Um, I'm not, I can't, I mean, I can read music, but I can't sight read fluently. Um, I should say yet, right? And I've got a pretty good ear, but, my technique and my ear are probably average, right? I mean, it would have been different, I think, if I had really stuck with it from a very young age consistently, but I haven't, right? So, but I love music. And so the challenge for me was in wanting to get back to performing um, was how can I do so in a way that blends my gifts, right? And for me, I really came up with this idea of blending music with life wisdom. So, what I did was I wrote out basically a performance that included a brief presentation on different topics like life lessons from music, creativity and expression, music as a metaphor for life, grief and loss, music with that, and mindfulness and enjoyment and play, appreciating and leveraging both our gifts but the gifts of others, really savoring others people's gifts that are more than ours, and on and on. So put together this performance of 10 or 12 songs along with a brief talk on these different life lessons for music.
It was amazing. I'm so glad that the recording was cool. It was like multiple cameras going to your hands and then over to your face. Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. It was worth it, right, to be able to do that and
Well, yeah.
to use it.
And I was grateful for you sharing it with me. So many things I mean, you fit so much into a very short, relatively short. I mean, I guess it was an hour, but it flew by, and every single minute was very impactful. So I'd like to talk about a few. I have some questions on a few things. I'd like to dig a little bit.
Okay.
You start out by talking about joy, healing, and joy. Um, and I am so curious, did you like start with that in mind, the joy, because you brought joy back at the end.
Mm,
And is there
yeah.
something about joy that you just like plugged into and you're like, this is when you were conceptualizing this project, was that the goal of it was to bring out joy and healing and joy?
Yeah.
Obviously,
Boy,
music is great, but
yeah, such a good question. So let's step back for a second. As a psychiatrist, I work a lot with suffering, right? And and I think that part of healing, right, is to find joy and flourishing in the midst of suffering, right? And most everybody who I see, this is actually universal for all of us. We all have trauma. And the only differences between you and I and others, right, is the nature of the trauma and the degree. And some of us are relatively lucky, and we've had relatively mild wounding. But what happens with trauma is it poisons the capacity for joy. And here's where I think music can be, and other art forms can be very healing for us, because they do help us to be able to tap into. I think about it that with trauma, the life agenda becomes one of surviving and reducing suffering, right? But
right.
without trauma, our life agenda, and actually to rewind, the trauma agenda is to reduce suffering by somehow restoring a sense of one's wholeness and connection to something good, right? That gets really wounded with trauma. And really, an untraumatized life agenda, I call that the three S's. surviving, maintaining our vitality biologically, right? Savoring this gift of existence, and then serving, surviving, savoring, and serving. Those three agendas get wounded with trauma. And so the music is really about really cultivating savoring, right? The savoring component of those three. And that's just very healing.
Yeah, and you start with a single note, like one note. Can you explain why you did that? You have all of these songs, you played this jazz, and you start your whole thing playing literally just one note on the piano. Why did you do that?
Right. So this is kind of a mindfulness a thing of really noticing and savoring just the capacity, the miracle that we can even hear and that we can see and we can sense. I mean, our brains are constructing a multidimensional, real-time, dynamic representation of reality that we're experiencing, right? But we exist entirely in something constructed in the contents of consciousness in our brains. And so it's very real, it's very vivid. And part of that is that capacity to hear a note and multiple notes. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you said we don't know how that works. Is that true? We don't know how that works, how we hear? I'd be curious to have an audiologist on here as well. I mean, I know that
well, we do know how it works, right? In terms of, neural input to the posterior temporal lobe, right, and all that. And
right.
so in a way, we know some of how it works, but what we don't, the ultimate mystery is we don't know how the brain creates consciousness, awareness fully.
You said a phrase that I loved, which was we habituate to the miraculous. Whoa.
Yes. Right? Yeah. So that was what that lesson was about, noticing and savoring, is just notice the incredible miracle, right? That we can even see, that we can hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We habituate to the miraculous. So part of awakening and savoring is just to dehabituate and just notice this incredible gift of existence.
Very, very Buddhist listening to you talk.
Well, it's
Um,
a couple of the greatest writers that I admire the most are Catholic priests.
yeah.
Anthony de Mello and Thomas Merton are Catholic priests, monks, and actually, I think they're both passed away, but they very much talk in this way. So I think this is multiple religions kind of embrace this
Yeah.
of understanding.
Well, and the work, not to get too off topic, I'll come back around, I promise. But I just performed at the the Pack here in Slow a piece called Songs of Joy, and one of the works in there was called Canticle of the Sun by Amy Beach, and it was based off of a poem by Saint Francis, um, written the year before. Like he was in horribly suffering, multiple illnesses,
Mhm.
in his cell, and he wrote this poem of celebrating on a very deep level kind of the miracles of life, which are the sun, the moon, very
Yeah.
basic, like just the world, our immediate world around us, and deeply celebrating those. Um,
Mm. I've got to
yeah,
listen to that. Oh, that sounds
it's
beautiful.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful poem. So okay, so you start with a single note, then you start adding, and
Mhm.
eventually you get to one of those juicy jazz chords. You add a note, and I'm like, oh, there's the jazz right there.
Yeah.
And you talk about wisdom and discernment. Can you explain what you're doing there?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the idea behind that in my clinical work, and really work of awakening and healing is you if you really want to see, you got to look, and if you really want to hear, you got to listen, right? Um, and those are intentional practices. So a lot of times in my clinical work, some may be bringing up, say, anxiety or depression, and I might ask them to look within and say, well, can you notice what's happening for you? And looking within. And I think, one of the biggest causes of suffering is the avoidance of suffering, right? But if we repress, we'll stay depressed, right? If you want to heal it, you got to feel it, right? But we all avoid pain, and yet looking deeply into our pain is a source of tremendous wisdom and discernment, right? So, as you know, as a musician, one of the things that we do in our ear training practice is we like I demonstrated, play two notes together and see if you can hear both of them at the same time and overcome the cocktail effect, right? Where all the notes blend, right?
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that next. What is the cocktail effect?
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I can hear three notes pretty well
Hmm.
now. But I know a lot of professional musicians who can hear four or five or six notes distinctly in a dense chord. I can't do that yet. My neural networks are not yet fully elaborated for that. But the practice of listening carefully, it literally rewires the brain. And looking carefully rewires the brain, both without and within. So the process of wisdom and growth and awareness and awakening and healing, these are all really through very careful discernment.
Yeah, and listeners, I would encourage you to try this sometime. I was intrigued. I hadn't done this particular exercise, but it's kind of like an add a note, and I could get pretty far. I could hear, but I could tell in the audience some folks at two or three notes, that's when it clicked. Basically, it's when does it sound um, like I love the like a cocktail, a blended cocktail versus here are three notes and
Right.
distinct.
Yeah. And if they're very
And it's
close
weird.
to
I
you.
could hear both of them.
Yeah.
I could hear da na 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 or
Hmm.
whatever the notes were,
And
and then
then
I could also kind of sit back and hear it as the flow, the chord. I don't know if that's the way my brain,
beautiful.
just because I've been playing music so long, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'd be
Yeah.
really curious, listeners. Let me know what your experience is. I thought that was such an interesting exercise.
Mm. Yeah.
I interview a lot of people on this from all kinds of musical communities, amateurs to experienced professional musicians as my guests. And in almost every conversation, we end up talking about perfectionism.
Mhm.
And you had some lovely things to say about perfectionism. What is your
Mm.
take on
Mm.
perfectionism in music?
Yeah. So, I have to say this is where music is very healing for me because I mean, if I were a professional musician, I would starve. I'm just not good enough. And I just don't have that yet. Um, and so when I play, there's a lot of imperfection, and that's really held me back because of my self-limiting feelings that, I'm really not good enough to play in a say a cocktail lounge, which is what I would really love to be able to do, right? I'm just not good enough. And like doing this performance, oh my gosh, it really took a lot of fortitude to even get myself because of my own self-doubt and self-judgment. So the way I see that, I don't think it's just me, right? But with my
Mm.
socialization and conditioning, like to become a doctor, you had to get the right answer. You had to get an A, you know? And
Yeah.
right? So it's deeply socialized in me that you got to be perfect. Or, you're not going to get into medical school, you're not going to pass your exams, you're not, so I think it's just so music is really an opportunity for liberation, right? As you remember, I played Blues for Alice, a Charlie Parker tune. That's a hard tune. It goes fast.
Mhm.
There's like a million chord changes, one after another, and really constructing a jazz line, improvisational line through that makes sense, right? But at the same time, if you hit a wrong note, it's okay, right? You just keep the flow going, right? And don't beat yourself up and don't judge yourself and just, let it be okay. So I don't know that that's where for me it was really good to sort of say it's okay to be just okay and to make mistakes, right?
And I feel like that was a lot of the crux of, well, and maybe that's just the part that spoke to me. Because again, I, almost every episode, Dr. Mike, we talk about perfectionism on
Oh
this.
yeah,
I think a lot of musicians just struggle because we all are in it to express emotion, and we all get so hung up so quickly on wrong notes or wrong phrasing, or I dropped a beat,
yeah,
or whatever it is. For me, this
exactly.
last weekend, my voice wasn't performing very well, so I there were some high notes that I just let other people sing, and
Hmm.
that's hard for me. So,
I
um,
get it. Yeah.
it's so interesting your take on um, You said if you wait until you're ready, you might never play.
Mhm.
And that's so true.
Yes. And think about how that's a good metaphor for life in general, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. There's a great book by Kitty Wheeler, I think, Effortless Mastery. Have you read that book yet? Um,
have not yet.
Yeah, I
No.
mean, and his point is that really great musicians, right? They really sidestep their egos, right? They're really staying grounded in that core primal passion that they had for music. And sure, they practice hard. I mean, really great musicians practice smart and hard and long, and they rest well, and but they never get hung up on whether it's perfect or not as a way that is demoralizing, right? If they hit a wrong note, then they'll go back and keep doing it until they get it right. But there's a certain ease in maintaining of that sense of joy with it all, whether it's perfect or not. So I think that's a touchstone for us for life in general.
I was also wondering if jazz has a unique place there. I feel like my background again is classical, and it's a little more like there are more like right notes
Mm.
in classical
Yeah,
music,
right.
and in jazz, I feel like it's a little more accepting of, well, did you meet like, is it going somewhere? You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I wonder if that is part of you mentioned music healing for you personally. Is your I wonder if that's do you feel like that's such a good balance, your work and your music, the perfectionism demanded by your
Yeah.
job and the freedom of expression in jazz?
It's a good question. It's nice to play classical music, but maybe it's just me, but I just love like taking a chord progression and then hearing and then playing something unique and new. Um, in other words, inventing the music in the moment. That's just so fun. And I think that's what Bach did, right? And Beethoven. I mean, all these great musicians. Back, I mean, they would sit down and do that, right? And then they would just write down what they invented, right? So, yeah.
I want to take a quick moment to talk a little more about Dr. Mike. He is a 3 times board certified psychiatrist specializing in trauma and addiction. He's practiced for over 30 years and worked with thousands of patients and clinicians. He's written 2 books on addiction and recovery and has all sorts of free resources on his website, including guided meditations, free ebooks, and recordings of presentations he's done, with titles like Healing Self-Hate and The Transformative Power of Integrating Spirituality into Psychiatry. I'm fascinated by this blending of the hard science of brain chemicals and neurotransmitters with mindfulness and spirituality all integrating with music. I'd actually like you to pause this episode, go to the description box, and open the link to the performance we're basing this conversation on. If you've made it this far in the episode, you'll want to see this performance. Please pause. Dr. Mike makes it clear he is an amateur pianist, and I think he uses this to set expectations that his playing may not be perfect. For the record, he's pretty good. He sees how far others have gone in jazz and even how much farther he can go, and he says, I'm not that, and that's okay. I love that because it really ties into 2 values I've had for a long time. 1, if music is being made, it has value. And 2, there is a place in society for all music that is being made. This especially includes amateur music, much to the chagrin of my snooty friends, you know who you are. For many, many years, I sang with a little community choir called the Concord's Chorale in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. It's a non-auditioned amateur group that performs for seniors in assisted living communities. They don't have the best technique, most of them don't have vocal training, but there is more heart packed into 1 season of the Concords than in 10 years of other groups I've sung with. That little group is important. The singers have so much fun and they carry that delight to their audiences. They work hard and they're proud of what they do. They build genuine connections with other choir members and really genuinely care about each other. They celebrate you and see you. That doesn't always happen in more professional groups. It might actually be the opposite. I stayed with that group pretty much until I left Portland, even while singing in other ensembles. This conversation with Dr. Mike reminded me how joyful it can be to be a beginner or a mediocre musician if you bring mindfulness into your practice and don't habituate to the miraculous. God, I love that phrase. Isn't that something to think about? Enough of me. Let's get back to the interview. One thing I really loved that you talk about was you brought up celebrating your strengths, which
Mhm.
leads you to celebrate the strengths of others.
Mhm.
What can you give some context for that
Yeah.
quote?
So I don't know if you saw, I mean, like I invited my friend Dr. Heister to come and play because, man, he can sight read like a monster. I mean, and like as you saw, his arpeggios are like out of this world. I mean, just
They were really good.
good technique, right? And I mean, I just can't sight read. I don't have that gift, right? So it was really nice to bring him and have him perform as well. Uh, and if we could be grounded in our basic goodness, like, hey, I may not be the best, but I'm okay and I'm good enough, and it's okay for others to be better than me. For me, that's a huge life lesson, right? And with trauma, that capacity gets very, very damaged, right? And I think even without trauma, we're social animals, and from a neurobiological and evolutionary perspective, right? Where you are in the hierarchy, how good you are or not, I mean, that used to matter. I mean, right, that would be life or death, right? If you look at a baboon tribe, the lowest one in the hierarchy doesn't get as much food and they don't live as long, right? So we are highly, highly attuned to social hierarchy, but we're in a different environment now where I think we can transcend our neurobiology. So an intentional practice of just being, it's good enough to be good enough, right? And to really enjoy music even though so many other people are so much more gifted than we are. I think that's a great opportunity to practice that and then to generalize that into our life and overall.
How do you practice celebrating your own strengths?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's so funny. I have one of a therapist that I worked with at one point. Um, kind of it invited me into a practice of a paradox. And so my life paradox is one of claiming my own unique brilliance and my gifts, right? But doing so with humility. Um, and I think that for a lot of us, again, you have to realize I'm kind of distorted because of my life. I live healing trauma, so I've got that trauma lens on right now. And so from that perspective, right, so many people are, because of their trauma, they get into this split in themselves where they're kind of like egomaniacs with inferiority complexes. Um, so in a way, people will maybe retreat into some sort of sense of finding refuge in, let's say, their grandiosity, but at the same time feeling deeply unwhole and broken and incomplete and unworthy at the same time. So the opposite of that, the paradox is to really, to really honor your gifts, right? And realize that your gifts were given to you. They're not anything you did. I mean, none of us chooses our genes or our brains or our families or our upbringing. All that we have is given to us, right? So how can we celebrate and claim that with an attitude of deep humility, right? So I think that the music and sharing music with others with this kind of attitude allows us to enjoy our music within the limitations of what we're capable of, right? While also appreciating and enjoying those who are much more gifted than we.
Yeah, I think I call it like the shadow side of ego. I
Mhm.
talk about this a lot with the other musician guests
Mhm.
too, because um, when I work with people in the general public and I say, oh, I talk about musicians,
Mhm.
like for example, spreading my podcast, getting more listens or whatever. People say, oh, you got to appeal to that ego. You got to appeal, musicians have egos. No, 99% of the 100% of the musicians I've talked to have this shadow side of ego where they don't believe in themselves. They always see, I think it's easier. Music is so communal. It brings us together. Making music with other people, I think, is healing,
Yeah.
and connecting and celebrating each other. And I think it can be easier to celebrate someone else's strengths.
Mhm. Right.
And we're very hard, and I know I fall into this too. I'm very hard on myself,
Mhm.
um, when I would easily give grace to somebody else in the same position,
Oh, I love that.
and celebrate them. So I think it's, yeah, I'm just curious again to hear how you, how do you navigate that in your own music? You lean in really heavily to I'm an amateur, um,
Mhm.
and your playing is very good for an amateur. You really do have beautiful, I love the way that you move your chords around. I love your improvisation, the melodies you choose. Um, and what do you celebrate in yourself, Dr. Mike?
The shadow side of ego. Yes, I like that.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress for me, right? I think there's that I do have that deep feeling that I'm just an amateur, and I think it's a daily practice of just accepting and being okay with that, right? And as you saw in that performance, it was like having that courageous act of saying, "Hey, I want to offer this to you all," and I think it's a benefit to you. And so it's like coming from that place of this is a wholehearted gift that I am giving to you. And really sort of again sidestepping ego and the shadow side of ego, right? And just
Right. Yeah, doing it anyway.
right, right. Yeah. But yeah, that's still there for me for sure. That shadow side is right there. You know, in shadow work, they talk about just sort of seeing your shadow and embracing your shadow and making friends with your shadow. And and in the kind of trauma work I do, I do a lot of parts work. It's about really having a compassion towards all of it, right? And I think I have a lesson on appreciation in there, right? I think, right, about that
Yes.
practice of appreciation.
Yes. Um, Another good one that you talk about, how do we maintain a balance of work, love, and play? I was delighted that you brought play in. We talk about work-life balance, meaning work and like family balance usually is what that means. And we play the piano, we play our instrument. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Well, I think as musicians, we fall into the trap of working our instrument rather than
I think so.
so how would you balance that? And then it goes back to these really master professional musicians, and again, Kenny Wheeler, I think is his name in that book, Effortless Mastery. He talks about the paradox, right? That the really brilliant masters maintain that capacity to work in terms of their practice, but also to always have that spirit of play.
Yeah, that really resonated with me. Again, um, I have taken some years off of piano. It's been well, kind of an intense couple years for me, and I haven't been able to play as often.
Mm.
And when you don't play as often, your skills start to atrophy.
Hmm.
And then I've been so judgmental on myself. I'll
Oh
sit
yeah.
down and try to read stuff that I was playing, fluidly before, and
Hmm.
it just isn't there. And it can
Yeah.
be demoralizing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've been really working to come to peace with that and say, you know what? I have all this experience now the last several years that I didn't have that I
Hmm.
can now put into my music, and so my music is bigger. I just need to dust off my fingers.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it can be demoralizing, right? Uh,
it's very demoralizing, and it prevented me from playing. I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna practice, and I would sit down and I would just,
right.
yeah,
Yes.
just
In a way that
I would just
demoralization
quit.
right. It's almost like it's self-perpetuating, right? Because it prevents you
It,
from it robs the joy out of doing something because we judge ourselves harshly and critically for not living up to
yeah.
our own expectations, right?
Yes, exactly. And actually, it was in preparation for this interview. This interview is more motivating to me. I was like, you know what? I can do 10 minutes a day. And just
Mm,
sit down and play, and it doesn't matter what it is.
mhm,
Lean into the amateur. I'm an amateur. I
mhm.
don't make money off of this either. Let's.
Yeah.
So, do you see your work and music as separate, or do you take properties from one into the other?
Mm, that's a good question. Well, I'm not a professional musician. I haven't been. I mean, I when I was playing in a band in medical school, we got paid for some of our gigs at parties and coffee. So I guess back at coffee houses and stuff. So I guess back then I was a professional musician, right? Because I got paid. But I haven't been paid since then, and I'm not a professional musician now. I'm not being paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I will someday, but not now.
Well, this thing that you did was a blend of your professional life with your music life. How did that feel to have those
Yeah.
two? Did it feel revealing or
Oh,
was it
perfect.
feel wholesome?
It
Oh,
felt
good.
so perfect. I mean, bringing together my passion and my skill, right, that I've cultivated over the past 35 years. So yeah, merging those passions was great. I actually did sign a contract to give these presentations in senior communities. So I have an agent. Um, and I haven't gotten any gigs yet, because these will all be next year. They do them in advance. But yeah, this may be the start of a new little mini career.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you'll be professional in no time.
Yeah.
Glad I'm zipping you up right now. The other thing, another of there were so many gems, but one thing, another about piano that you said was the piano doesn't care about your background. It just responds to the touch. Can you talk about that? I found that
Mm,
could be really helpful for so many people.
right, right. It's neutral, right? It's just
It's
responding to what
neutral.
you put in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no judgment. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so clear and clean, right? It's just giving you feedback directly based on what you're doing with your relationship with the instrument. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so many people are unhappy with different parts. I mean, my most recent guest was talking about healing through songwriting,
Yeah.
healing
Mhm,
her trauma through songwriting.
mhm.
And this is, again, an important reminder.
Yeah.
Your instrument, it just takes you whoever you are.
Yeah.
It's just, it's right there for you.
Yeah, it's not judging you.
And then you wrap up your event where you started with joy.
Mm,
Nice little bow on the top. And you share some thoughts about taking music beyond the instrument into our beings.
mhm,
Can you talk about that for a
mm.
moment?
Right, right. Yeah. It that really music is nonverbal, right? I mean, I suppose if you have a song with lyrics, right, and you're mixing the music with lyrics, then there's a verbal component. But when you're listening to music, right, it's really you're getting beyond thought. You're getting into a direct experience it's if you take away that, it really is an experience of being. Um, uh, and and really meditative practices like if you get into a deep mindfulness experience, you reach a point of a non-dual experience. There is just this one taste, right? um, and that experience, that non-dual experience of just deep being, right, that we there is this awareness which is suffused with the contents of awareness. And there is no thinker. I mean, there are thoughts without a thinker. There is just being, right? And so when we get into a deep appreciation, a deep presence with music, I think it can really trigger that. And it's just, oh my God, it's just the most profound, fulfilling, beautiful experience. Such a gift that we have, that we can create music together and share it with each other. So wonderful as a way of tapping into being.
I love it. I have a question I'll get to shortly here, but this is Zeitgeist Radio, right? You know what Zeitgeist means?
Isn't that like the total like understanding or the what is zeitgeist?
It's like it translates to spirit of the
Oh,
times.
okay, yeah.
And so it's like what it feels like
Hmm.
in any it can be used in several ways in any era, the zeitgeist. Even picture what it feels like to be alive now
Yeah.
versus in the 90s. Very, very different feeling.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and I have an anthropology degree in addition to my music,
Oh.
and I am always so interested in what people plug into, that
Mm.
connection.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think through music, for me at least, through music, I can relate through to so many things that are both different and the same. I know that sounds contradicting, but
Mhm.
like when I was taking music history classes, through the music, if I was understanding what was going on politically, the gossip, what was going on in 1795 opera houses, and then the music, you listen to the music, it's completely different and you just get it. It all makes sense. Um, and I loved that, that I think that moment of connection is really what we look for as musicians and what we strive for in our performances or when we're making music with other people is that feeling of bondedness
Mhm.
to people who are maybe physically present with us, but maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago, writing music as well. It kind of transcends time as
I
well.
love that. That's beautiful. Have you ever listened, Morgan, to a piece of music so deeply that you felt that you could actually feel the composer?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Beethoven for me, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony for me is the
Mm.
meaning of life, and I'm
Mm.
not joking when I
Oh
say
my God.
that.
It's such a that feeling of connectedness, right, to another being
Hmm.
created that. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
very big. That's huge.
yeah. Well, and I've called moments like that. I call them zeitgeist moments
Gotcha.
because I don't know of another word for
I
that.
love that.
But when you're listening and you plug into the spirit of the times,
Uh-huh.
whatever time, or maybe it's your little
Mhm.
subculture that you're in.
Yeah.
Um, so I would like to share a zeitgeist moment with you, and then I'd love to hear from you about a moment or two of
Okay.
either recent or memorable.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, I've been playing piano a little every day,
Mhm.
trying to get my chops back.
Good.
And I have a daughter who's, at the time we're recording, she's 9 months old. So I've been bringing her up to the piano and we'll play together. She'll go crash, 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 and I'll kind of improvise around it.
Mhm.
It's very sweet. Well, I watched your thing in your performance in two pieces, and the second piece I put on with just no headphones, just speaker in the room. And she was in her corner playing, and she just stopped and she like looked up at me, and then she looked at the piano, and it was so delightful watching her. Wait, I know that noise. I associate it with the piano, but there's nobody at the piano. And watching her brain try to make sense. So I brought it down, and when we were watching it together, and she was so delighted watching you play through the screen. And then that was right again, it was towards the tail end, and you started talking about small joys and small things eliciting big emotions.
Mm.
And here I am looking at this small little
Yeah.
person.
Oh my gosh.
What
Uh,
a joy and
yes.
such big emotions in this small
Mm.
person.
Mm. Yeah, that came from inside of you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
I know.
oh,
Yes.
that is so moving, right?
It
Yeah.
was a moment for me. Yeah, kind of this
Um, wow.
generational music touching us all and really
Yeah,
taking the small things and how meaningful that can be.
yeah. Oh,
Um,
well, maybe there are no small things, Morgan.
maybe small joys, I think, are maybe more important than big
Yeah,
joys.
yeah, yeah. The greatest, right? The most. That is very. That's a very moving moment. So that's what I thought about dehabituating to the miraculous, right? Is that there are no small joys, there are no small moments. I mean, even, people talk about boredom, right? Let's say you're just sitting in an empty room. If you stop and then make the decision to just carefully notice and savor the capacity to be aware of being bored, I mean, that itself can be profoundly interesting. So
Yeah.
we have this capacity, right, to really notice and savor, every moment of existence, and it's a practice. Um, and we all get off track, and we get distracted by our thinking, and we get caught up in ruminations and concerns, and some of them are very real survival concerns. Somebody's mad at us at work or whatever, right? And we get caught up and lost and swept away. So it's like coming back again and again and again and again and again to this sacred, precious moment. So I don't know, and with music, right? I mean, that when we're in that zone, right?
Yeah.
I
Well, I'd love to hear from you. When was a time, either a recent time or just a particularly memorable time when you felt connected like that?
okay. So this like yesterday, Sunday. I'm working in a hospital temporarily up in Massachusetts right now, doing some work with people who are committed for addictions treatment. And these are, oh my gosh, really so unfortunate people. Born to parents who had addiction and beaten and abused sexually in other ways, and given up and abandoned and put into group homes and raised in institutions, and then going from there into gangs and using drugs at the age of 12 on, and lives of criminality and dealing and stealing to support their habits, and suicide. Oh, right. So that's the population I'm working with right now. And this is my wheelhouse. I mean, these are my people. I love doing this work with them. Um, and so I'm renting this in-law apartment at this house here in Plymouth, and the landlord just happens to be a really cool guy, and he's a musician. He plays the guitar, and we've we've gotten to know each other, which is kind of odd, right? I mean, here I am a tenant, and we're like becoming friends. So he came over with the guitar, and he's more of a bluegrass kind of folk guy, and and he doesn't know how to read music. And and so and I'm more of a jazz guy, but we start jamming together, and I'm like picking out the chords are pretty simple, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to hear the music and play and accompany him. So we're doing that where he's singing and playing, and he sounds really, really good. And I just had this moment of like, here we are jamming together, right? Creating music together spontaneously with this guy who I just happened to be leasing an in-law apartment from, who I'm making this wonderful connection with through the music. Morgan, it was so cool. It was fun.
Well, I want to celebrate so hard what something you just said, which was like, yeah, it was so easy to follow along with the chords.
Mhm.
That's challenging for me.
Really?
I'm not my ear, I'm very visual, and I think that is such a skill, and I admire so much people who can just sit down and play, and that's a goal I have some days to be able to do that exact thing
Mhm.
that you're doing. So
Well,
I know you say you're an amateur, but boy,
you will,
you're
you
very
will. So I'll tell
skills.
you another story here for our listeners. This is really important. Is it so his name is Derek, and Derek was saying, "Yeah, man, I wish I could read music like I wish I could do like what you do and all that kind of stuff." And I said, "Oh yeah, well, you can take lessons, you can learn to read music and all that kind of stuff." And if you want to do that, that'd be great. And then I thought about it. I realized I had made a really mistake, and I want to share this with our listeners, because I went to my friend ChatGPT, ChatGPT, and I asked it to list me all the famous musicians who couldn't read music. Oh my gosh, right? I mean, there are even some classical musicians who can't really read music very well. Um, and so I sent him the list, and I said, forget what I said, right? Just savor and enjoy your capacity to sing and play the guitar and make music the way you do. It's all good. And that sort of brought me back to this simple pleasures theme, right? Is that can we just celebrate this gift that we have for being able to make music together, and not worry about whether we can do music or not or whatever.
And it must have been I'm just picturing, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall, bluegrass and jazz. What an interesting fusion. That must have been pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously it's like I had to adapt my style to match.
Yeah, I'm sure he did too.
Well, I was not swinging, let's put it that way.
Right, right. Dr. Mike, thank you so much for coming. This time has flown by, and I so appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you.
appreciate what you've brought into the world. What is your hope for this moving forward?
Yeah, I would like to elaborate into a series of maybe 5 to 10, full 1-hour performances and just go deeper, right, on each of these topics. So, for example, finding joy in both small and large things, maybe have 3 or 4 or 5 or maybe 8 songs, right? And really talk more about exploring that in much more detail. I mean, right now what I put together is maybe 12 pages. I'd like to expand it into maybe 100 pages or 150 pages of
Yeah,
content and then have a repertoire rather than just 12 songs, maybe 100 songs, something like that.
that's amazing. And I don't even think you got to all 12.
No,
The hour.
no, we ran out of time. Yeah.
It was amazing. And thank you for sharing with my listeners. I'll
Mhm.
put the link in the description. Um, Go take a listen, everybody. It's just gem after gem after gem. So enjoyed it.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you for having me on your. This is a great
Yeah,
project you have. It's really, really lovely.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Zeitgeist Radio, and thanks to Dr. Mike for joining me. The link to his performance and his website are in the episode description. Please check them out and please watch his performance. Please follow me too at Zeitgeist Academy on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And don't hesitate to reach out with a Zeitgeist moment of your own. You can send them to me at info@zeitgeistacademy.com. I always love to hear from fellow music lovers. Thanks for listening.